Good morning, YouTubers. John Gilkison, Aero Stealth here. It is Thursday, August 10th, 2023, and I have a few moments here to shoot a video, and this is totally going to be unscripted, but I wanted to talk about the prospects of net zero by 2050, and this is going to be more in the philosophical realm because I don't have a lot of stats or anything for you other than anecdotal ones. However, let's see if we can't get this adjusted so I can relax. There we go. We have, in the way of anecdotal evidence, we have what we've done with our own household since 2010. So in the last 13 years, we've installed 5.1 kilowatts of solar power. That was installed near the end of 2012, so you might as well just say 2013 at the beginning of the year. And so that would be, we've had solar for 11 years, coming on December 1st of this year. So initially that was set up based on an 8-cent rec rate, is what they called it. In other words, the utility was paying us 8 cents for the power they bought from us. And that ended 3 years ago. And of course our bills went up. Before that, we got money most of the year, except for about 4 months out of the year with air conditioning, and maybe 1 month in the winter when we had low production and heating going on. Anyway, so that did reduce our carbon emissions, of course. And then in the year 2016, we bought a Ford C-Max Energy, which is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And that vehicle cut our emissions by about 50%. In other words, the car would, on gasoline only, would only average about 32 miles per gallon on the highway, but we averaged like 52 miles per gallon net. We were getting like 90, 100 miles per gallon on electric only driving. It only had 20 miles electric only range, but that added up to 50% of our driving, oddly enough. So after owning that vehicle for 4 years, we really wanted to get an all-electric vehicle because it became patently obvious to me that I was unnecessarily carrying around an internal combustion engine all the time and drivetrain and the complexity of it all, and an electric drive, a BEV, would be a lot more efficient, and that's proved to be the case. About two years ago and 2 months ago, that'd be 26 months ago, we bought a Chevrolet Bolt, a 2019, which had a 60 kilowatt hour battery pack, but it got upgraded to a 65 kilowatt hour battery pack on the recall. And its average, long-term average, has been about 126 miles per gallon. Right now, with this heat in this summer, we're down to about 115 on average, because the air conditioning loads in the car when we drive it are really tremendous. And the heat also impacts the efficiency of the charging and the efficiency of the drivetrain and the electronics in it and everything else. So it's hard on it. Hopefully those figures are going to begin to improve as the days get shorter and high and low temps begin to drop a little bit more. Um, so Of course, along with all this, we've moved to, as most people did, to all LED lighting in our house. And recently, um, well, one of the things I did, let me back up a little bit. We went to a pellet stove for the house. So we just stopped using propane. And a lot of people will want to argue with you about the carbon cycle of a pellet stove. But my feeling is that it's a suitable application for home heating. I disagree with it on an industrial scale or cutting down whole forests and shipping them to Europe. But for using waste wood to just heat a home, it makes a lot of sense to me. And that this wood, if it just sat around laid on the ground, decayed, it would emit this carbon anyway. So if you burn it, and a pellet stove's really efficient, not only thermally, but they don't produce anywhere near as much air pollution as a regular wood burning stove. So I give it a win. It's cut our propane use in half, basically. Cut our bill, cut the cost for heating our home in half, propane versus the wood. So we do use the furnace for backup now and then. If it gets really cold, we'll use it to just top off, let's say the house gets down to 66 or 67 degrees. We'll turn the furnace on for a short while to heat the whole house up and then turn it right back off. And that helps the stove do its job because it's slightly undersized. So that's one. We're up to over 120 miles per gallon on our car equivalent, and that's all. It's a mix of solar and wind and natural gas in New Mexico are pretty good, and so our carbon emissions are much reduced over what they would be driving a gas car. So final piece of the straw, just recently we installed an induction stove in our house, and it cost us $650 just to get the 240 volt outlet installed behind the stove so we could do that. However, we really like the stove. It gets rid of burning propane, open flame source inside of our house. They're really fast and clean, and so that's reduced our emissions quite a bit. Now there's two other items which we haven't addressed yet, which we would like to in the future. The one big one's going to be a water heater, and as soon as our propane water heater gives up the ghost here, which it will do pretty soon, in a few years, we'd like to switch to a heat pump water heater, and we can get them 120 volts nowadays. So you almost can think of the water itself as a big storage, like battery. And once you heat it up, it just depends on your rate of usage. If we had a really big call for hot water in our house, like a lot of people do, we'd want a 240 volt unit, but I think we could get by with a 120 volt unit. But anyway, needless to say, that's going to be north of $1,000. And then we've got to figure out a way to get it installed also. So there you have that. And the only other thing that would be left would be clothes drying, which we're still using propane for, and it's not. I'm not that impressed with the heat pump clothes dryers just yet. I think they're a great idea. They seem to be a bit slower than regular clothes dryers, and you almost need a backup resistive heater in them to make them operate just as fast. And That's an issue with clothes dryers. However, we are on what's called a whole house EV rate rider, which means we only pay 4.7 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity between the hours of midnight and 8 a.m. So you could push some of this clothes drying off onto those hours as you could the water heater. So this would be a win. What I'm getting at with all this is just my anecdotal evidence in my personal life, is that all this maybe adds up to 70-80% reduction in carbon emissions. We still have a pickup truck which we use to tow a trailer, but we just drive the truck enough to keep it operating in good operating condition. So once a week we'll take it to town or something. So we try to keep the mileage of the truck under 100 miles a month, and that's working out. The truck's got 80,000 miles on it anyway, and I'd like to make it last, so no reason to just keep racking up miles on it. So if in my personal life, and I haven't done everything I've described here yet, but maybe I can get down to 80-90% reduction in carbon emissions. And that doesn't include any externalities. And by that I mean all the stuff we buy has a carbon footprint on it. Comes from somewhere, took carbon emissions to produce it, transport it, put it in the stores, so forth. And so our current form of civilization is just a big CO2 production machine. And it's this whole idea of getting to net zero by the year 2050, which by the way is only about 27 years away, something like that. It's just not going to happen. I think what they mean by net zero is they can offset the carbon emissions somehow. In other words, reduce our carbon emissions by X, and what's left over we can pull out of the atmosphere, sequester underground, plant trees, whatever it is they're talking about, some kind of mathematical legerdemain, which is not entirely honest. So, but let's say our society could reach 90% reduction in CO2 emissions by the year 2050. We'll call that net zero. Well, 90% of what we're doing now, let's say let's just use the figure 40 gigatons to use a round number. We're close to that right now, somewhere in that neighborhood per year. That would reduce it to 4 gigatons per year. And this would be a good thing, and it would have been a lot better thing if we'd have done it 30 years ago, or started 30 years ago. Because when the first COPs were initiated back in the 1990s, we're talking 30 years now of COPs, carbon emissions have went up 60% in the intervening 30 years. And I try not to even pay much attention to these COPs anymore because they're co-opted. We have all these fossil fuel groups which attend them, and they get the right part of the agenda because they're there as an NGO or whatever. I don't know how this works. I don't know why they allow them in the door. And countries like Saudi Arabia and the rest, these big carbon emitting countries, should not be allowed to have any overriding votes on the agenda. They should be a minority opinion. And that's it. So I don't see us accomplishing much with the COPs. I think technology and technological progress will do a lot more than the cops can, and that it is possible humans might reach a 90% reduction in carbon emissions by the year 2050. I seriously doubt it with all the actions being taken by the fossil fuel industry, which is worth trillions of dollars a year in profits. And they're doing everything they can to delay and stall any progress in this sphere. So, and they have a lot of powerful influence, not only in our Congress, but in governments all around the world. So, and there's been a really dark joke going around recently that net zero by the year 2050 means human extinction. And that would do it. If humans went extinct by the year 2050, we would be at net zero. We would stop emitting carbon. At least it wouldn't matter to us anymore. We wouldn't be here to care. And I think that's basically where we're headed. The last week we've seen temperatures reported of 100 degrees, air temperatures reported of 100 degrees in Argentina, and the temperate belt down there, equivalent to our middle of our country. And it's the equivalent of February down there because it's in the southern hemisphere winter. So their July is our February. And then we had ocean temps of 100 degrees off the Florida Keys. And the planet's just been on fire this year. And I'm afraid we're going to look back at this year nostalgically when things were still reasonable. It's going to continue to get worse because we've poured over 500 gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere. And all this trapped heat has to go somewhere, and most of it goes into the ocean, 90% of it. And now it's coming back out of the ocean. And I hate to say it, but I think we're kind of screwed. So I don't tell people to buy an electric car, get solar panels, or any of this stuff to save the planet. What I do say is reducing your carbon emissions. And none of us know enough about the future to say otherwise. That reducing your personal carbon emissions is you're doing your part to mitigate carbon emissions. And the devil can take the hindmost. The carbon emissions I'm not responsible for, other than how I vote and who I patronize, what kind of businesses I'll patronize, what kind of products I buy, and so forth. So that's just the long and short of it. You got to do what you can in your own personal life, and if you can make it dovetail with reducing your cost, like we've done, we've reduced the cost of our transportation, we've reduced the cost of our heating our home and cooking. All those things are a net positive for us, and we've reduced our carbon emissions. So that's the way to go. There's no reason not to do it. It's in your own enlightened self-interest to do this kind of stuff, even if it's not going to turn the climate around on a dime, which it won't. It's unimaginable the amount of energy that can be stored in the Earth ocean climate system. They talk about it all the time. We're adding 13 Hiroshima bombs of heat to the ocean every second. And the storage capacity of the oceans and heat is just tremendous. And we're going to pay the piper. And if we clean up the atmosphere from aerosol pollution, in the meantime, we'll end up paying the piper there because aerosol masking actually reduces the heating of the planet. So we need to take a haircut there because I'm against all this geoengineering. Again, we don't know enough about the whole system to even be involved with trying to do something like that. And we've been doing something like that for hundreds of years, and it's been a miserable failure. So I think we ought to stay out of it. If we got cleaner technology, we ought to use it and take the haircut. Anyway, I'm going to let you go there. Human extinction by 2050, or net zero by 2050, or is net zero by 2050 equals human extinction in 2050? It's up to us, I hope. Take care, everybody. Sorry for this gloomy video, but I wanted to get it out there, share it with you. Bye-bye.